The Sahara Desert looks endless. Nothing grows here. Only hot wind and empty sand. But today, something impossible is already happening. A massive garlic bulb is pulled from the ground. It is larger than a human head. White layers shine under the desert sun. Scientists stand in silence. No one expected this result. They slowly cut it open. Juice runs down the knife. The inside is fresh, perfect, alive. But this is not where the story began. We go back to day 1. The land was completely empty. No plants, no life. Just dry, cracked sand stretching for kilometers. Scientists arrived with a strange idea. They wanted to grow garlic in the Sahara Desert. They dug deep trenches into the sand. Black soil was brought in and mixed carefully. Drip irrigation pipes were laid under the ground. Then, garlic seeds were placed one by one into the sand. No one knew if anything would happen. But then, the desert began to change. Days passed in silence. At first, nothing seemed to change. The Sahara stayed the same. Hot, empty, still. But under the sand, something was moving. The garlic seeds were waking up. Tiny roots began to spread through the black soil. Slowly, carefully, searching for water. Then, green appeared. At first, it was only a few small shoots, barely visible above the sand. But each day, they grew stronger. The irrigation system released small drops of water, just enough to keep life alive in the desert heat. And then, something unusual happened. The green spread faster than expected. Lines of garlic plants began to stretch across the sand. What was once empty desert started turning alive. Scientists returned every day. They watched in silence, measuring, recording, not speaking much, because what they were seeing did not match their predictions. The plants were growing faster in the desert than in normal farmland, and no one knew why. Something changed in the soil. The growth did not slow down. It increased. The garlic plants were now stronger than expected. Thicker stems, larger leaves, deeper roots. Scientists checked the systems again. Water levels were normal. Soil nutrients were stable. Nothing explained the speed. But the field kept expanding. Green lines turned into wide patches, then into full rows stretching across the desert test zone. At night, the desert cooled, and the plants seemed to grow even more. This was unusual. Garlic normally needs controlled conditions. But here, in extreme heat and dry air, it was thriving. One scientist wrote a note. This should not be possible. Yet it was happening in real time. The Sahara was no longer just sand in this area. It was becoming a living agricultural field. And the most shocking part was still ahead. Weeks passed. The garlic field was now fully established. Rows of green stretched across the desert test zone. But something new began to appear. Certain plants grew much larger than the rest. Their stems thicker. Their leaves heavier. Scientists marked these areas carefully. They called them anomalies. Inside these zones, the soil behaved differently. It stayed moist longer. It held more nutrients. No one understood why. Then, the plants entered a final stage of growth. The garlic bulbs underground began to expand rapidly. Not normally. Much larger. Faster. Deeper. The ground started to rise slightly in some spots, as if something below was pushing upward. Scientists prepared for harvest. They did not know what they would find, but they knew it would not be normal garlic. The first digging began, and the desert held its breath. The digging became deeper. The soil was no longer dry sand. It was dark, moist, heavy. Something massive was below the surface. Scientists worked slowly, carefully. Each layer of soil revealed more white shape. Then it appeared. A single garlic bulb. But it was not normal. It was enormous. Larger than anything seen before in agriculture. Its surface was clean. Perfectly formed. Almost unnatural. The team paused. No one spoke for a moment. Then the final cut began. The last layer of soil was removed, and the full shape was revealed. A giant garlic structure, deep underground, connected to multiple roots and nutrient channels. It looked like it had been growing for years, maybe even decades. Scientists documented everything, but they still had no explanation. Then came the harvest moment. The giant garlic was lifted from the ground. Slowly, carefully, the desert wind moved across the empty field. And in that silence, the Sahara had changed forever. After the harvest, the desert became silent again. The giant garlic was taken to the research station. Scientists began careful analysis. Every layer was measured. Every cell was studied. The results were confusing. The garlic structure was normal in composition, but its growth pattern was not. It showed signs of accelerated development, as if time had moved differently underground. Soil samples were tested again. Water systems were checked again. Everything looked normal, but the data still did not match reality. Then came a final observation. The Sahara soil in this area had changed. It was no longer just sand. It now held organic memory. It retained nutrients longer than before. The desert had been altered, not destroyed, not damaged, but transformed. And the most surprising part, even after the experiment ended, small green shoots began to appear again in nearby sand. The Sahara was still changing, quietly, slowly, like something had awakened beneath it. Months later, the experiment site was no longer active. The equipment had been removed. The scientists had left. Only the desert remained. But the Sahara was not the same anymore. In the old test zone, something unexpected was happening again. Green shoots were appearing in small clusters, far from irrigation, far from control. No one planted them this time. They simply grew on their own. Researchers returned for one final survey. They found something even more unusual. The soil still carried changes. It behaved differently from normal desert sand. It held moisture longer. It supported life longer. It was as if the desert had learned something, not just from water, but from time itself. The team documented everything one last time. Then they left the desert again. But one question remained. Was the experiment really over? Or had it only just begun?